In this video, we are going to print up this pattern in greater than or equal to 6 ways, basic to advanced. So let's go with the first method. Let's call it method 1, and we are going to use two loops here, one for the rows and the inner two loops. So we are going to use in general 3 loops here. The inner 2 loops will be for the columns to print the spaces and the numbers. Okay. So the first inner loop will be for the spaces and the second inner loop will be used to print the numbers. Okay. So let's put the values in the range here. The values of I will be going from 1 to 5, that is the number of rows here. So it will be going from 1 to 6 not inclusive, and inside the inner first loop we have to print in the first iteration 4 spaces, then 3, 2 and 1, and then 0 spaces. Okay. So here we are going to put 5 comma I comma minus 1. So let's understand why we are using this one. When I is equal to 1, the first inner loop will be going from 5 to 1 not inclusive, that is 5, 4, 3, 2. So it will be running 4 times and we will be having 4 spaces printed in the first iteration. And we are using minus 1 because we are decreasing the values of j. In the print statement, we are going to use spaces, 2 spaces, because in this statement here we are going to make sure we have space in between the numbers. So that's why we are using 2 spaces here. And if we don't want space in between the numbers, we have to make sure that we use only a single space here. So now we want space in between the numbers, so we are using 2 spaces for this first column. Now I put an and equals single quotes, nothing in there, using and because we want the numbers to be printed from the same line itself, so that the next loop doesn't start from the next line. And inside the second inner loop we are going to put k here, and let's use k here, different variable for the second inner loop, and the value of k must go from 1 to I plus 1. That is, when I is equal to 1, the value of k in the second inner loop will go from 1 to 1 plus 1, 2, and 2 is not inclusive, so we are going to go from 1 to 1, that is, it will run only a single time and 1 will be printed. And in the next iteration, when I is equal to 2, the inner loop will go from 1 to 2 plus 1 not inclusive, that is 1 to 3 not inclusive, that is only 1 and 2 will be printed. But we want these to be printed in the same line, so we are going to use and equals a space in between single quotes, so that we have space between these two numbers, and so on. But in the next iteration of the outer loop, we want to make sure that it goes into the next line, so we have to use a print statement here. And let's execute it now, and you can see the required pattern that we wanted here. So now let's generalize it. N is equal to 5 in place of 6, n plus 1, and here in place of 5 we are going to use n, and let's execute it now. So it is generalized. Let's make sure n is equal to 5, 7, it works there too. Okay, so we have generalized it. Get back to the default one, and now we are going to further reduce the number of loops. Now in the method 2, we are going to reduce the number of loops to 1 and a single statement for printing these spaces. The outer loop will be for the rows as usual, and the inner loop will be for printing the numbers. And here we are going to use a print statement to print the spaces here, and inside the inner loop we are going to use a print statement to print the numbers. Okay, the values of the outer loop will be go from 1 to 6 not inclusive, 6 is not inclusive here. And here we are going to print the spaces, double space as we did here, and we are going to multiply it with 5 minus I. Put an end here so that the inner loop executes in the same line itself. In the single quotes, nothing. So when I is equal to 1, the spaces will be printed 5 minus 1, that is 4 times, as we have these many spaces here. Okay, first of all let's put the values of I here, and they must be going from I to I plus 1. That is, when I is equal to 1, the inner loop will go from 1 to 1 plus 1 not inclusive, 1 to 2 not inclusive. That is, it will execute only one times and will print 1 here. Second iteration, I is equal to 2, it will go from 1 to 2 plus 1, 3, 3 not inclusive, that is 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 will be printed here. And here we'll be using J to print the values, and end equals single quotes a space, so that we have a space between these two numbers. And here we are going to print a print statement, so that in the next iteration it doesn't go in the same line itself. Okay, and let's execute it now. In place of I, we have to put 1 here because we want the starting element to be 1. Okay, and let's execute now. And here you can see the required pattern. Okay, now in the method third, we are going to reduce the number of lines one more time. This time we are going to use a string here, 1 2 3 4 5 as its characters. We'll be using enumerate function, which gives us both the indices as well as the elements of the string. And enumerate over x, use a print statement here. We are going to use two print statements, one for printing the spaces, one for printing the numbers. Okay, so the value of I will be going from 0 to the length of the string s minus 1. That is, I will go from 0 to how many elements we have? 5. So it will go from 0 to 4. And j is the characters in the string. That is, j is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So in the first statement, we are going to put spaces here and multiply it with 4 minus I. So 4 minus I, when I is equal to 0 in the first iteration, so we will be having 4 minus 0, that is 4 times spaces will be printed. Okay, and we should make sure that it goes into the same line in the next print statement to print numbers. Okay, and inside the second print statement, we are going to use slicing here, star s, and in the square brackets we are going to put I colon I plus 1, and instead of I we are going to use 0 here. Okay, so what does this statement does here? Star s is used to print all the elements by slicing with a space in between them. Okay, so when I is equal to 0, this statement will go from 0th index to 0 plus 1 not inclusive. That is, it will go from 0 to 0 only. It means only one element will be printed. Okay, and in the next iteration, when I is equal to 1, it will be going from 0 to 1 plus 1, 2 not inclusive. That is, it will be going from 0th index to 1th index. It means we will be having two elements of the string as printed, that is 1 and 2, with the space in between them, and so on. So let's execute it now, and here you can see the required pattern. Now in the method 4, we are going to get rid of this string and we'll be using a while loop for printing the pattern. So we are going to put I is equal to 1 and a while loop to test the condition until I is less than 6. It means it will go from I is equal to 1 to 5, and use a print statement here. And inside the print statement, first we are going to print the spaces, how many spaces we want to print. That is, in the first iteration we have 4 spaces, that is 5 minus I is equal to 1, 5 minus 1 is 4, so we'll be having 4 spaces here, and so on. Okay, after printing the spaces, put a comma here, and equals in the single quotes nothing. Okay, so it will print the spaces, and we are going to use one more print statement here to print the numbers here, and this time we are going to use star range. It's same as the star s. It will print the range of the elements ranging from 1 to I plus 1 not inclusive. In the first iteration, I is equal to 1, it will go from 1 to 1 plus 1, 2 not inclusive, that is 1 to 1. That is, it will print only 1 in the first iteration. Let's increment I here by 1. Okay, in the next iteration, I is equal to 2, it will go from 1 to 2 plus 1, 3, 3 not inclusive. It will print 1 and 2 only, and so on. That is it. It will print the elements with the spaces because we are using star. Execute it, and here you can see the required pattern. So let's generalize it. You can generalize these ones also. Let's generalize this one here. N is equal to 5 in place of 6, n plus 1 in place of 5, put n in here, execute it, same pattern, n is equal to 7, and here you can see it printed. Okay, get back to the default one. In the third, you have to put the elements here 6, 7, and in place of 4 you have to put 1 less than the number of elements, that is 6, and here you can see the required pattern. Let's get back to the default one here. Alright, and in here also you can generalize it. N is equal to 5 in place of 6, n plus 1 in place of 5, n. Execute it, increment the value of n is equal to 7. Here you can see it has been generalized. Let's get back to the default one, and now we are going to reduce one more line. So this time we are just going to convert this while loop into the for loop. Let's call it method 5. I'm going to use a for loop here for I in range 1 to 6 not inclusive, and here we are going to copy the same statements here until this one. Okay, and let's execute it now. Here you can see the same required pattern in just 3 lines and a single loop. This pattern from what we did earlier was these many lines and 3 loops. That was a heavy task, but now we made it easy with increasing the efficiency and decreasing the program size in greater than or equal to 5 ways. So let's generalize it. N is equal to 5 in place of 5, that is n, in place of 6, n plus 1. Execute it. Now let's increase the value of n, and here you can see the required pattern. Let's get back to the default one here. Okay, so please subscribe PyProTricks and boost upstation, and that's it for now.
Thank you for watching. Now it's time to discover more. Simply click on the screen to subscribe to our channel and watch another video to discover more.